Welcome. I am Daisy, your hostess. In this video, we continue with the philosophy of Plotinus as we move into the next group of treatises under the heading of Second Enneads, translated by Stephen McKenna. If you just found me at this video, I don't want you to feel left out. Please visit my playlist. You'll be able to grab the first group of Enneads as well as the introduction, giving a background on Plotinus. An interesting fella, I may add. Not a name I was familiar with, and if I had to describe this guy, he's like a caterpillar that didn't even know he was a butterfly. Also, I want to take a minute here and send my most heartfelt appreciation for all my friends, families, and new subscribers. Thank you so very much. Your support and comments mean the world to me. Now, getting back to what I have here for you. In the previous video, Plotinus expanded on the concept of matter from questions as, is matter a substance? Is it corporeal or not? They had questions like trying to make sense of its qualities. Is it evil, or does it hold any potential? So after this long dissertation, he ends up surmising that matter is ultimately viewed as a precondition for the existence of bodies, but it is not considered physical stuff in itself. So how he got there, you can find out in the previous video. As a point of interest, he also mentions Aristotle's fifth body as immaterial, and this fifth body or element is referring to the ether. Now, for a point of amusement, the word aether, sometimes spelled A-E-T-H-E-R, we're very familiar with just the ether with the E only in the front. Well, according to various sources, this word comes from ancient Greek. Some sources say that the philosopher Aristotle was the first person to use it in that 4th century, describing it as an element lighter than air that surrounds the celestial body. And consider, Aristotle is in that 4th century BC, where we have Plotinus. He's years now into the future after the death of Jesus Christ and Constantine, and getting together with all the chaos that's been happening around that area of the world, with the kind of this whole disillusionment, and with the way things were, with the politics, with the religion, things were going kind of cuckoo and crazy, and this new rise was coming, not only in politics, but also in religions. And so here is Plotinus in the middle of all that mess. So another thing is that other sources state that the word aether goes back even further to the 8th century, and used in the context of the early Greek cosmogony and mythology, appearing in Hesiod's Theogony as well as Homer's Odyssey. Both of those works you can also find in my playlist. Anyways, enough with the trivia, and let's go to what you came here for, right? We'll turn the page. Plotinus, the Second Enneads, translated by Stephen McKenna. 5th Tractate. Potentiality and Actuality. 1. A distinction is made between things existing actually and things existing potentially. Actuality also is spoken of as a really existent entity. We must consider what content there is in these terms. We can distinguish between actuality, an absolute abstract principle, and the state of being in act. And if there is such an actuality, is this itself in act? Or are the two quite distinct so that this actually existent thing need not be itself an act? It is indubitable that potentiality exists in the realm of sense, but does the intellectual realm similarly include the potential or only the actual? And if the potential exists there, does it remain merely potential forever? And if so, is this resistance to actualization due to its being precluded as a member of the divine intellectual world from time processes? First, we must make clear what potentiality is. We cannot think of potentiality as standing by itself. There can be no potentiality apart from something which a given thing may be or become. Thus, bronze is the potentiality of a statue. But if nothing could be made out of the bronze, nothing wrought upon it, if it could never be anything as a future to what it has been, if it rejected all change, it would be bronze and nothing else. its own character it holds already as a present thing, and that would be the full of its capacity. It would be destitute of potentiality. Whatsoever has a potential must first have a definite character of its own, and its potentiality will consist in its having a reach beyond that character of some other. Sometimes after it has turned its potentiality into actuality, it will remain what it was. Sometimes it will sink itself to the fullest extent in the new form and itself disappear. These two different modes are exemplified in 1. Bronze as potentially a statue, and 2. Water, primal liquid, as potentially bronze, or again, air as potentially fire. But if this be the significance of potentiality, may we describe it as a power towards the thing that is to be? Is the bronze a power towards a statue? Not in the sense of an effectively productive force. Such a power could not be called a potentiality. Of course, we may consider potentiality as a power when we are referring not merely to a thing which may be brought into actualization, but to actuality itself, the principle or abstract in which potentiality and the power of realizing potentiality may be thought of as identical. But it is better, as more conducive to clarity, to use potentiality in regard to the process of actualization and power in regard to the principle, actuality. Potentiality may be thought of as a substratum to states and shapes and forms which are to be received, which it welcomes by its nature and even strives for, sometimes in gain, but sometimes also to loss, to the annulling of some distinctive manner of being already actually achieved. 2. Then the question rises whether matter, potentially what it becomes by receiving shape, is actually something else, or whether it has not actuality at all. In general terms, when potentiality has taken a definite form, does it retain its being? Is the potentiality itself in actualization? The alternative is that when we speak of the actual statue and the potential statue, the actuality is not predicated of the same subject as the potentiality. If we have really two different subjects, then the potential does not really become the actual. All that happens is that an actual entity takes the place of a potential. The actualized entity is not the matter, the potentiality merely, but a combination, including the form idea upon the matter. This is certainly the case when a quite different thing results from the actualization. The statue, for example, the combination, is distinctly different from the bronze, the base, where the resultant is something quite new. The potentiality has clearly not itself become what it is now actualized. But take the case where a person with a capacity for education becomes in fact educated. Is not potentiality here identical with actualization? Is not the potentiality wise Socrates the same man as the Socrates actually wise? But is an ignorant man a being of knowledge because he is so potentially? Is he, in virtue of his non-essential ignorance, potentially an instructed being? It is not because of his accidental ignorance that he is a being of knowledge. It is because, ignorant though he be by accident, his mind, apt to knowledge, is the potentiality through which he may become so. Thus, in the case of the potentially instructed who have become so in fact, the potentiality is taken up into the actual, or if we prefer to put it so, there is on this one side the mere potentiality, while on the other the potentiality has taken form. If then the potentiality is the substratum, while the thing in actualization, the statue, for example, is a combination, how are we to describe the form that has entered the bronze? There will be nothing unsound in describing this shape, this form which has brought the entity from potentiality to actuality, as the actualization, but of course as the actualization of the definite particular entity, not as actuality the abstract. We must not confuse it with the other actualization, strictly so called, that which is contrasted with the power-producing actualization. The potential is led out into realization by something other than itself. Power accomplishes of itself what is within its scope, and the accomplishment is its actuality. The relation is the existing between a temperament and its expression in act, between courage and courageous conduct. So far, so good. 3. We come now to the purpose of all this discussion, to make clear in what sense or to what degree actualization is predicable in the intellectual realm, and whether all is in actualization there, each and every member of that realm being an act, or whether potentiality also has place there. Now, if there is no matter there to harbor potentiality, if nothing there has any future apart from its actual mode, if nothing there generates, whether by changes or in the permanence of its identity, if nothing goes outside of itself to give being to what is other than itself, then potentiality has no place there. The beings there possess actuality as belonging to eternity, not to time. Thus, however, who with us assert matter in the intellectual realm will be asked whether the existence of that matter does not imply the potential thereto. For even if matter there exists in another mode than here, every being there will have its matter, its form, and the union of the two, and therefore the potential separable from the actual. What answer is to be made? Simply that even the matter there is idea, just as the soul, an idea, is matter to another, a higher being. But relatively to that higher, the soul is potentiality? No, for the idea to which it is matter is integral to the soul and does not look to a future. The distinction between the soul and its idea is purely mental. The idea and the matter it includes are conceived as a conjunction but are essentially one kind. Remember that Aristotle makes his fifth body immaterial. But surely potentiality exists in the soul. Surely the soul is potentially the living being of this world before it has become so. Is it not potentially musical, and everything else that it has not been and becomes? Does not this imply potentiality even in the intellectual existences? No, the soul is not potentially these things. It is a power towards them. But after what mode does actualization exist in the intellectual realm? Is it the actualization of a statue where the combination is realized because the form idea has mastered each separate constituent of the total? No. It is that every constituent there is a form idea, and thus is perfect in its being. There is in the intellectual principle no progression from some power capable of intellection to the actuality of intellection. Such a progression would send us in search of a prior principle not progressing from power to act. There all stands ever realized. Potentiality requires an intervention from outside itself to bring it to the actualization which otherwise cannot be. But what possesses of itself identity unchangeable forever is an actualization. All the first, then, are actualizations, simply because eternally and of themselves they possess all that is necessary to their completion. This applies equally to the soul, not to that in matter, but to that in the intellectual sphere. And even that in matter, the soul of growth, is an actualization in its difference. It possesses actually, and not like material things merely an image, the being that belongs to it. Then, everything in the intellectual is in actualization, and so all there is actuality? Why not? If that nature is rightly said to be sleepless, and to be life and the noblest mode of life, the noblest activities must there be. All then is actualization there. Everything is an actuality, for everything is a life, and all place there is the place of life, in the true sense the ground and spring of soul and the intellectual principle. 4. Now, in general, anything that has a potentiality is actually something else, and this potentiality of the future mode of being is an existing mode. But what we think of as matter, what we assert to be the potentiality of all things, cannot be said to be actually any one being among beings. If it were of itself any definite being, it could not be potentially all. If then it is not among existences, it must necessarily be without existence. How, therefore, can it be actually anything? The answer is that while matter cannot be any of the things which are founded upon it, it may quite well be something else, admitting that all existences are not rooted in matter. But once more, if it is excluded from the entities founded upon it and all these are beings, it must itself be a non-being. It is further, by definition, formless and therefore not an idea. It cannot then be classed among things of the intellectual realm, and so is, once more, a non-being. Falling, as regards both worlds, under non-being, it is all the more decidedly the non-being. It has eluded the nature of the authentic existences. It has even failed to come up with the things to which a spurious existence can be attributed, for it is not even a phantasm of reason as these are. How is it possible to include it under any mode of being? And if it falls under no mode of being, what can it actually be? 5. How can we talk of it? How can it be the matter of real things? It is talked of, and it serves precisely as a potentiality. And, as being a potentiality, it is not of the order of the thing it is to become. Its existence is no more than an announcement of a future, as it were a thrust forward to what is to come into existence. As potentiality, then, it is not any definite thing, but the potentiality of everything, being nothing in itself, beyond what being matters amounts to. It is not in actualization. For if it were actually something, that actualized something would not be matter, or at least not matter out and out, but merely matter in the limited sense in which bronze is the matter of the statue. And its non-being must be no mere difference from being. Motion, for example, it's different from being, but it plays about it, springing from it and living within it. Matter is, so to speak, the outcast of being. It is utterly removed, irredeemably what it was from the beginning. In origin it was non-being, and so it remains. Nor are we to imagine that, standing away at the very beginning from the universal circle of beings, it was thus necessarily an act of something, or that it became a something. It has never been able to annex for itself even a visible outline from all the forms under which it has sought to creep. It has always pursued something other than itself. It was never more than a potentiality towards its next. Where all the circle of being ends, there only is it manifest, discerned underneath things produced after it. It is remoter from the real being even than they. Grasped, then, as an underlie in each order of being, it can be no actualization of either. All that is allowed to it is to be a potentiality, a weak and blurred phantasm, a thing incapable of a shape of its own. Its actuality is that of being a phantasm, the actuality of being a falsity, and the false in actualization is the veritably false, which again is authentic non-existence. So that matter, as the actualization of non-being, is all the more decidedly non-being, is authentic non-existence. Thus, since the very reality of its nature is situated in non-being, it is in no degree the actualization of any definite being. If it is to be present at all, it cannot be an actualization, for then it would not be the stray from authentic being, which it is, the thing having its being in non-beingness. For, note, in the case of things whose being is a falsity, to take away the falsity is to take away what being they have, and if we introduce actualization into things whose being and essence is potentiality, we destroy the foundation of their nature, since their being is potentiality. If matter is to be kept as the unchanging substratum, we must keep it as matter. That means, does it not, that we must define it as a potentiality and nothing more, or refute these considerations. end of the 5th tractate of the second Ennead. We'll stay right here. If you haven't done so, hit that like button, and I'll go ahead and turn the page to the 6th tractate, titled Quality. 1. Are not being and reality distinct? Must we not envisage being as the substance stripped of all else, while reality is this same thing, being, accompanied by the others, movement, rest, identity, difference, so that these are specific constituents of reality? The universal fabric, then, is reality in which being, movement, and so on are separate constituents. Now, movement has being, not essentially, but as an accident, and therefore should have reality as an accident. Or is it something serving to the completion of reality? No. Movement is a reality. Everything in the supreme is a reality. Why then does not reality reside equally in this sphere? In the supreme there is reality because all things are one. Ours is the sphere of images, whose separation produces grades of difference. Thus, in the spermatic unity of all the human members are present undistinguishably. There's no separation of head and hand. Their distinct existence begins in the life here, whose content is image, not authentic existence. And are the distinct qualities in the authentic realm to be explained in the same way? Are they differing realities centered in one reality or gathered round being, differences which constitute realities distinct from each other within the common fact of reality? This is sound enough, but it does not apply to all the qualities of the sphere, some of which no doubt are differentiations of reality, such as the quality of two-footedness or four-footedness, but others are not such differentiations of reality, and because they are not so, must be called qualities and nothing more. On the other hand, one and the same thing may be sometimes a differentiation of reality and sometimes not. A differentiation when it is a constitutive element and no differentiation in some other thing, where it is not a constitutive element but an accidental. The distinction may be seen in the constitutive whiteness of a swan or of a ceruse, and the whiteness which in a man is an accidental. Where whiteness belongs to the very reason form of the thing, it is a constitutive element and not a quality. Where it is a superficial appearance, it is a quality. In other words, qualification may be distinguished. We may think of a qualification that is of the very substance of the thing, something exclusively belonging to it, and there is a qualifying thing that is nothing more, not constituting but simply giving some particular character to the real thing. In this second case, the qualification does not produce any alteration towards reality or away from it. The reality has existed fully constituted before the incoming of the qualification, which, whether in soul or body, merely introduces some state from outside, and by this addition elaborates the reality into the particular thing. But what if the superficial appearance, such as the visible whiteness in ceruse, is constitutive? In the swan, the whiteness is not constitutive, since the swan need not be white. It is constitutive in ceruse, just as warmth is constitutive in the reality, fire. No doubt we may be told that the reality in fire is not warmth, but fieriness, and in ceruse an analogous abstraction. Yet the fact remains that in visible fire, warmth or fieriness is constitutive, and in the ceruse, whiteness. Thus the same entities, warmness, whiteness, and fieriness, are represented at once as being not qualities, but constituents of reality, and not constituents, but qualities. Now it is absurd to talk as if one identical thing, warmth, whiteness, or the like, changed its own nature according to whether it is present as a constituent or as an accidental. The truth is that while the reason principles producing these entities contain nothing but what is of the nature of reality, yet only in the intellectual realm do the produced things possess real existence. Here they are not real, they are qualified. And this is the starting point of an error we constantly make. In our inquiries into things, we let realities escape us and fasten on what is mere quality. This fire is not the thing we so name from the observation of certain qualities present. Fire is a reality, not a combination of material phenomena. The phenomena observed here and leading us to name fire call us away from the authentic thing. A quality is erected into the very matter of definition, a procedure, however, reasonable enough in regard to things of the realm of sense, which are in no case realities but accidents of reality. And this raises the question how reality can ever spring from what are not realities. It has been shown that a thing coming into being cannot be identical with its origins. It must here be added that nothing thus coming into being, no thing of process, can be a reality. Then how do we assert the rising and the supreme of what we have called reality from what is not reality? Example, from the pure being which is above reality. The reality there, possessing authentic being in the strictest sense, with the least admixture, is reality, not so much by being produced as by existing among the differentiations of the authentic being, or better, reality is affirmed in the sense that with the existence of the Supreme is included its act, so that reality seems to be a perfectionment of the authentic being, though in truth it is a diminution. The produced thing is deficient by the very addition, by being less simplex, by standing one step away from the authentic. 2. But we must inquire into quality in itself. To know its nature is certainly the way to settle our general question. The first point is to assure ourselves whether or not one and the same thing may be held to be sometimes a mere qualification and sometimes a constituent of reality. Not staying on the point that qualification could not be constitutive of a reality, but of a qualified reality only. Now, in a reality possessing a determined quality, the reality and the essence precede the qualified reality. What, then, in the case of fire, is the reality which precedes the qualified reality? Its mere body, perhaps? If so, body being the reality, fire is a warmed body, and the total thing is not the reality, and the fire has warmth, not essentially, but as a man might have a snub nose. Rejecting its warmth, its glow, its lightness, all which certainly do seem to be qualities, and its resistance, there is left only in its extension by 3 dimensions. In other words, its matter is its reality. But that cannot be held. Surely the form is much more likely than the matter to be the reality. But is not the form a quality, and not therefore a reality? No, the form is not a quality. It is a reason principle. And the outcome of this reason principle entering into the underlying matter, what is that? Certainly not what is seen and burns, for that is the something in which these qualities inhere. We might define the burning as an act springing from the reason principle. Then the warming and the lighting and other effects of fire will be its acts, and we still have found no foothold for its quality. Such completions of a reality cannot be called qualities, since they are its acts emanating from the reason principles and from the essential powers. A quality is something persistently outside reality. It cannot appear as reality in one place after having figured it another as quality. Its function is to bring in the something more after the reality is established, such additions as virtue, vice, ugliness, beauty, health, a certain shape. On this last, however, it may be remarked that triangularity and quadrangularity are not in themselves qualities, but there is quality when a thing is triangular, by having been brought to that shape. The quality is not the triangularity, but the patterning to it. The case is the same with the arts and avocations by which human beings take the quality of being instructed, etc. Thus, quality is a condition superadded to a reality whose existence does not depend upon it, whether this something more be a later acquirement or an accompaniment from the first. It is something in whose absence the reality would still be complete. It will sometimes come and go, sometimes be inextricably attached, so there are two forms of quality, the movable and the fixed. 3. The whiteness thereof in a human being is clearly to be classed not as a quality, but as an activity, the act of a power which can make white. And similarly, what we think of as qualities in the intellectual realm should be known as activities. They are activities which, to our minds, take the appearance of quality from the fact that, differing in character among themselves, each of them is a particularity which, so to speak, distinguishes those realities from each other. What then distinguishes quality in the intellectual realm from that here, if both are acts? The difference is that these quality activities in the supreme do not indicate the very nature of the reality, as do the corresponding activities here, nor do they indicate variations of substance or of essential character. They merely indicate what we think of as quality, but in the intellectual realm must still be activity. In other words, this thing, considered in its aspect as possessing the characteristic property of reality, is by that alone recognized as no mere quality. But when our reason separates what is distinctive in these quality activities, not in the sense of abolishing them, but rather as taking them to itself and making something new of them, this new something is quality. Reason has, so to speak, appropriated a portion of reality. That portion manifests to it on the surface. By this analogy, warmth, as a concomitant of the specific nature of fire, may very well be no quality in fire, but an idea form, belonging to it, one of its activities, while being merely a quality in other things than fire. As it is manifested in any warm object, it is not a mode of reality, but merely a trace, a shadow, an image, something that has gone forth from its own reality, where it was an act. And in the warm object is a quality. All then that is accident and not act, all but what is idea form of the reality, all that merely confers pattern, all this is quality. Qualities are characteristics and modes other than those constituting the substratum of a thing. But the archetypes of all such qualities, the foundation in which they exist primarily, these are not qualities but activities of the intellectual beings. And one and the same thing cannot be both quality and non-quality. The thing void of real existence is quality, but the thing accompanying reality is either form or activity. There is no longer self-identity when, from having its being in itself, anything comes to be in something else with a fall from its standing as form and activity. Finally, anything which is never form, but always accidental to something else, is quality unmixed and nothing more. And this is the end of the 6th tractate. We'll go ahead and move on to the 7th tractate right here on this video, and it's titled Complete Transfusion. 1. Some inquiry must be made into what is known as the complete transfusion of material substances. Is it possible that fluid be blended with fluid in such a way that each penetrate the other through and through? Or a difference of no importance if any such penetration occurs, that one of them pass completely through the other? Those that admit only contact need not detain us. They are dealing with mixture, not with the coalescence which makes the total a thing of like parts, each minutest particle being composed of all the combined elements. But there are those who, admitting coalescence, confine it to the qualities. To them the material substances of two bodies are in contact merely, but in this contact of the matter they find footing for the qualities of each. Their view is plausible because it rejects the notion of total admixture, and because it recognizes that the masses of the mixing bodies must be whittled away if there is to be mixture without any gap, If that is to say, each substance must be divided within itself through and through for complete interpenetration with the other. Their theory is confirmed by the cases in which two mixed substances occupy a greater space than either singly, especially a space equal to the conjoined extent of each. For, as they point out, in an absolute interpretation, the infusion of the one into the other would leave the occupied space exactly what it was before, and where the space occupied is not increased by the juxtaposition, they explain that some expulsion of air has made room for the incoming substance. They ask further how a minor quantity of one substance can be spread out so as to interpenetrate, speck by speck or drop by drop, a major quantity of another. In fact, they have a multitude of arguments. Those, on the other hand, that accept complete transfusion might object that it does not require the reduction of the mixed things to fragments, a certain cleavage being sufficient. Thus, for instance, sweat does not split up the body or even pierce holes in it, and if it is answered that this may well be a special decree of nature to allow of the sweat exuding, there is the case of those manufactured articles, slender but without puncture, in which we can see a liquid wetting them through and through so that it runs down from the upper to the under surface. How can this fact be explained, since both the liquid and the solid are bodily substances? Interpenetration without disintegration is difficult to conceive, and if there is such mutual disintegration, the two must obviously destroy each other. When they urge that often there is a mixing without augmentation, their adversaries can counter at once with the exit of air. When there is an increase in the space occupied, nothing refutes the explanation, however unsatisfying, that this is a necessary consequence of two bodies bringing to a common stock their magnitude equally with their attributes. Size is as permanent as any other property, and exactly as from the blending of qualities there results a new form of thing, the combination of the two, so we find a new magnitude. The blending gives us a magnitude representing each of the two. But at this point the others will answer, if you mean that substance lies side by side with substance and mass with mass, each carrying its quantum of magnitude, you are one with us. If there were complete transfusion, one substance sinking its original magnitude in the other, we would have no longer the case of two lines joined end to end by their terminal points and thus producing an increased extension. We would have line superimposed upon line with therefore no increase. But a lesser quantity permeates the entire extent of a larger. The smallest is sunk in the greatest. Transfusion is exhibited unmistakably. In certain cases, it is possible to pretend that there is no total penetration, but there are manifest examples leaving no room for the pretense. In what they say of the spreading out of masses, they cannot be thought very plausible. The extension would have to be considerable indeed in the case of a very small quantity to be in true mixture with a very large mass, for they do not suggest any extension by change as that of water into air. 2. This, however, raises a problem deserving investigation in itself. What has happened when a definite magnitude of water becomes air, and how do we explain the increase of volume? But for the present we must be content with the matter thus far discussed out of all the varied controversy accumulated on either side. It remains for us to make out on our own account the true explanation of the phenomenon of mixing, without regard to the agreement or disagreement of that theory with any of the current opinions mentioned. When water runs through wool, or when papyrus pulp gives up its moisture, why is not the moist content expressed to the very last drop, or even without question of outflow? How can we possibly think that in a mixture the relation of matter with matter, mass with mass, is contact and that only the qualities are fused? The pulp is not merely in touch with water outside it or even in its pores. It is wet through and through so that every particle of its matter is drenched in that quality. Now, if the matter is soaked all through with the quality, then the water is everywhere in the pulp. Not the water, the quality of the water. But then, where is the water? And if only a quality has entered, why is there a change of volume? The pulp has been expanded by the addition. That is to say, it has received magnitude from the incoming substance, but if it has received the magnitude, magnitude has been added. And a magnitude added has not been absorbed. Therefore, the combined matter must occupy two several places. And as the two mixing substances communicate quality and receive matter in mutual give and take, so they may give and take magnitude. Indeed, when a quality meets another quality, it suffers some change. It is mixed, and by that admixture, it is no longer pure and therefore no longer itself, but a blunter thing, whereas magnitude joining magnitude retains its full strength. But let it be understood how we came to say that body passing through and through another body must produce disintegration, while we make qualities pervade their substances without producing disintegration. The bodilessness of qualities is the reason. Matter, too, is bodiless. It may, then, be supposed that as matter pervades everything, so the bodiless qualities associated with it, as long as they are few, have the power of penetration without disintegration. Anything solid would be stopped either in virtue of the fact that a solid has the precise quality which forbids it to penetrate, or in that the mere coexistence of too many qualities in matter constitutes density and so produces the same inhibition. If then what we call a dense body is so by reason of the presence of many qualities, that plenitude of qualities will be the cause of the inhibition. If, on the other hand, density is itself a quality, like what they call corporeity, then the cause will be that particular quality. This would mean that the qualities of two substances do not bring about the mixing by merely being qualities, but by being apt to mixture. Nor does matter refuse to enter into a mixing as matter, but as being associated with a quality repugnant to mixture, and this all the more since it has no magnitude of its own, but only does not reject magnitude. 3. We have thus covered our main ground, but since corporeity has been mentioned, we must consider its nature. Is it the conjunction of all the qualities, or is it an idea, or a reason principle whose presence in matter constitutes a body? Now, if the body is the compound, the thing made up of all the required qualities plus matter, then corporeity is nothing more than their conjunction. And if it is a reason principle, one whose incoming constitutes the body, then clearly this principle contains embraced within itself all the qualities. If this reason principle is to be no mere principle of definition exhibiting the nature of a thing, but a veritable reason constituting the thing, then it cannot itself contain matter, but must encircle matter, and by being present to matter elaborate the body. Thus the body will be matter associated with an indwelling reason principle, which will be in itself immaterial, pure idea, even though irremovably attached to the body. It is not to be confounded with that other principle, treated elsewhere, which dwells in the intellectual world by right of being itself an intellectual principle. End of 7th tractate. We're turning the page to the 8th tractate. Why distant objects appear small. 1. Seen from a distance, objects appear reduced and close together, however far apart they be. Within easy range, their sizes and the distances that separate them are observed correctly. Distant objects show in this reduction because they must be drawn together for vision, and the light must be concentrated to suit the size of the pupil. Besides, as we are placed farther and farther away from the material mass under observation, it is more and more the bare form that reaches us, stripped, so to speak, of magnitudes as of all other quality. Or it may be that we appreciate the magnitude of an object by observing the salience and recession of its several parts, so that to perceive its true size we must have it close at hand. Or again, it may be that the magnitude is known incidentally as a deduction from the observation of color. With an object at hand, we know how much space is covered by the color. At a distance, only that something is colored, for the parts, quantitatively distinct among themselves, reaching us only in a blurred impression. What wonder, then, if size be like sound, reduced when the form reaches us but faintly? For in sound the hearing is concerned only about the form. Magnitude is not discerned except incidentally. Well, in hearing magnitude is known incidentally, but how? Touch conveys a direct impression of a visible object. What gives us the same direct impression of an object of hearing? The magnitude of a sound is known not by actual quantity, but by degree of impact, by intensity, and this in no indirect knowledge. The ear appreciates a certain degree of force, exactly as the palate perceives by no indirect knowledge a certain degree of sweetness. But the true magnitude of a sound is its extension. This the hearing may define to itself incidentally by deduction from the degree of intensity, but not to the point of precision. The intensity is merely the definite effect at a particular spot. The magnitude is a matter of totality, the sum of space occupied. Still, it will be objected the colors seen from a distance are faint, but they are not small as the masses are. True, but there is the common fact of diminution. There is color with its diminution, faintness. There is magnitude with its diminution, smallness, and magnitude follows color diminished stage by stage with it. But the phenomena is more easily explained by the example of things of wide variety. Take mountains dotted with houses, woods, and other landmarks. The observation of each detail gives us the means of calculating, by the single objects noted, the total extent covered. But where no such detail of form reaches us, our vision, which deals with detail, has not the means towards the knowledge of the whole by measurement of any one clearly discerned magnitude. This applies even to objects of vision close at hand, where there is variety, and the eye sweeps over all at one glance, so that the forms are not all caught. The total appears the less in proportion to the detail which has escaped the eye. Observe each single point, and then you can estimate the volume precisely. Again, magnitudes of one color and unbroken form trick the sense of quantity. The vision can no longer estimate the particular. It slips away, not finding the standby of the difference between part and part. It was the detail that prevented a near object deceiving our sense of magnitude. In the case of the distant object, because the eye does not pass stage by stage through the stretch of intervening space so as to note its forms, therefore it cannot report the magnitude of that space. 2. The explanation by lesser angle of vision has been elsewhere dismissed. One point, however, we may urge here. Those attributing the reduced appearance to the lesser angle occupied allow by their very theory that the unoccupied portion of the eye still sees something beyond or something quite apart from the object of vision, if only airspace. Now consider some very large object of vision, that mountain for example. No part of the eye is unoccupied. The mountain adequately fills it so that it can take in nothing beyond, for the mountain as seen either corresponds exactly to the eye space or stretches away out of range to right and to left. How does the explanation by lesser angle of vision hold good in this case, where the object still appears smaller, far, than it is, and yet occupies the eye entire? Or look up to the sky, and no hesitation can remain. Of course, we cannot take in the entire hemisphere at one glance. The eye directed to it could not cover so vast an expanse. But suppose the possibility, the entire eye then embraces the hemisphere entire, but the expanse of the heavens is far greater than it appears. How can its appearing far less than it is be explained by a lessening of the angle of vision? End of 8th tractate. At the next video, as we continue with the 9th tractate of the second Ennead, and it's titled Against the Gnostics, or Against Those that Affirm the Creator of the Cosmos, and the cosmos itself to be evil. That title sounds like it's going to be interesting. Please do hit like, share, and subscribe.